Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Professional You Experience. Today we're here with Hoppe, a very special guest who is in the education industry.
So firstly, I want to acknowledge the fact that we're in a different set right now. Us professional fellas forgot to reserve the room that our set is in, so lesson learned. So here we are now, so I hope you guys enjoy our new set.
So as I mentioned, Liv is an education major, and so we're going to be talking about her experiences with the practicum and student teaching, as well as participating in the Catch Conference, and basically just making the most of her professional experiences. So let's get started with the practicum. That was your first initial step into student teaching. Can you tell us a little of what that consisted of?
Yes, so Bloomsburg University sets it up so that you can kind of make baby steps into the classroom. So I got to start off with my practicum. We get an advisor for our practicum as well as for student teaching. So our practicum advisor places us in a classroom and you spend 1 day a week in the classroom. So it's kind of just leading you up to understanding how the full school week works.
Do you feel that it was beneficial going into the classroom and student teaching?
Absolutely. I think I could speak for myself and probably all education majors. It's really scary, the thought of going in a classroom, coming from a classroom where you're just learning about how to teach. So practicum was a good way to set us up for student teaching and then for actually teaching in a classroom of your own.
So taking that step from the practicum to actually student teaching, I'm sure that was a pretty challenging moment for you. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, the biggest one was waking up once a week at 6 a.m. is okay, and you could deal with that, but waking up every single day, 6 a.m., and really having to prioritize teaching over anything else was something I didn't know how to prepare myself for, but waking up once a week was definitely a good way to set us up for having to do that full time.
And do you feel that your professors or other mentors, per se, do you feel that they helped transition you into this student teaching role, and do you feel that they supported you throughout the whole time?
Absolutely. So having advisors for each practicum and student teaching was extremely helpful. They break it down week by week, honestly, so you kind of get to ease your way into everything and they lead you through all of it. And also we have a seminar class during student teaching, so we get to talk to professors every week and talk to other student teachers or other students in their practicum and share our experiences and how we dealt with different things in the school.
So there's a vast amount of education majors within Bloomsburg University itself. What kind of made you want to go towards that early education?
Well, it definitely was not the straightest, easiest path for me. I switched my majors a couple times. I started off at Bloomsburg University as a sign language interpreting major because I'm from New York and there are a ton of Cleary, which is School for the Deaf, schools within my district. So I was very familiar with that. And then I came to Bloomsburg. I switched to deaf education because I realized I really wanted to stick with that education route. And then over time, I realized that general education was more so for me, so I switched over. So it definitely took me a minute to do it, but I was so inspired by my education teachers all throughout my whole life, especially elementary school. I always looked up to them. I truly could never say I had a teacher who I despised or made my day worse. I mean, of course there were some, but I always really looked up to my teachers and I kind of wanted to be like them. I wanted to be somebody who made their children or students excited to come to school.
So how can students make the most out of their required experiences through the education program, such as that practicum or the student teaching experience?
I would really say to step out of your comfort zone and put in a lot of hard work for it, honestly, and a lot of people aren't used to it at that point because up to then you're just taking classes and making lesson plans that in the moment seem very tedious and just like homework. But once you really get in the classroom, you realize how important these things are that you were learning and using and how much they really tie in with what you're teaching and how successful your teaching will be.
So we only briefly highlighted what really went into that student teaching experience. Can you go a little bit more into depth about what your day-to-day looked like, maybe some of the challenges that you faced?
Absolutely. So when you first enter the classroom, personally, I'm placed in a 4th grade science classroom, and I also did my practicum in this same classroom. So as you enter the classroom, you ease into how much you teach. You start off teaching either 1 period a day or 1 subject a day, and then you slowly add on more and more. And by the 2nd or 3rd week, you should be fully taking over, which is really nice because your co-op, which is the cooperative teacher that you're in their classroom, They are extremely helpful with the process, and you kind of get to understand their way of teaching and how you could either mend with it or switch it up a little bit. And so yeah, over time you start teaching full-time, lesson planning full-time, you are fully in control of the classroom and the assessments and everything. So it can be very scary, but from everything I've learned in my classes in Bloomsburg throughout the years, I understand what I'm looking for, what my goal is, and how I can get to it.
Lesson planning seems like a really difficult task to overcome, especially knowing that these students are going to be learning what you're teaching. Can you kind of give us a quick overview of what lesson planning looks like?
So lesson planning is something that we are introduced to from freshman year. So a lot of students and people going into student teaching or their practicum are very familiar with it. But all throughout college, it kind of felt more like an assignment. However, once I actually stepped foot in the classroom, I realized it's more like second nature. It can be difficult to figure out exactly what you want to teach within a subject, but a lot of schools offer content and a curriculum for you to follow. My school personally doesn't offer a strict curriculum, but we are offered Pennsylvania state standards, which we learn all about throughout the 4 years in college, and those are what we align our lessons to, so we can ensure that we're teaching the students the right thing for their given grade level, and that when standardized testing at the end of the year, like my students right now are taking their PSSAs, when this comes around, they know the knowledge they need at that given time.
So you were also involved with the Catch Conference, right?
Yes.
So what made you step your foot in the door and go to that conference?
So that conference is offered for student teachers, senior year student teachers, and it's really to prepare you for getting a job. So at that point, you've already done half of your student teaching experience and you're pretty familiar with how to teach and how a school system works. But what they do is they network you with teachers from all around the country. It was honestly amazing. There were teachers from Alaska too, and they've said they've gotten so many students jobs before there. But
Wow.
You get to interview with all these teachers and get to know about schools all around the country. And also they pull alumni from Bloomsburg from all around the country, like teaching, and they share their experiences as well, and you get to ask them questions. So it was very helpful.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was.
So what were some of the highlights of that conference for you?
I think getting to ask teachers questions was a big highlight because it was a space with only educators and school-related personnel. So you kind of got to hear the realist opinions that they could give, and they all had real stories and experiences to share. So if you had a question, it was something they could answer from their heart instead of a curriculum that they're taught to teach you.
Do you feel that this ascended you into the education industry a little bit better and got you a little more comfortable?
Absolutely. So at the end of the Catch Conference, they have a interview expo. So you get to sign up for interviews with teachers, and I had never done a job interview before that for a school. So it was a really good experience to get to practice that interview. Even if you're not truly interested in one of the schools, it's just a great experience to get practice in. So a lot of the student teachers were doing that.
And those job interviews, they were on the fly, right? It's not like you go to a separate room. You're in the one big room. You go to an employer and they're like, all right, let's interview right then and there, right?
Absolutely. They would just pull over a chair and say, take a seat if you're interested in interviewing now. And if you weren't interested in interviewing in that moment, then you can give them your number or your email, sign up, and then you would do it later on that day.
Was that a little bit like nerve-wracking for you?
It was crazy, honestly. They just literally would pull over a chair and say, take a seat, and start asking you questions about yourself. So a lot of us prepared ourselves ahead of time and kind of practiced interviewing beforehand just to make sure, but it was just a great experience to get us ready for the real thing.
So that conference happens every year, correct?
Yes, I believe they have it fall and spring semester for any student teachers.
Do you have any advice for students who might be attending next year on how to get the most out of that experience?
Absolutely. I would say go in thinking that you are going to do interviews, bring a ton of resumes, because I brought what I thought was a ton of resumes and it was not enough. So bring as many as you can print, and definitely go in prepared to do interviews, because there are some students who didn't take advantage of that, and that's okay, but it was very helpful and like a reliable resource to prepare yourself.
So there's so much that goes into all of these experiences that you have to do. Do you have any advice for students to take advantage of everything rather than just the Catch Conference? How can they take advantage of every little aspect one step at a time?
I would say start early, because it really hit me like a brick wall senior year when I actually was stepping into the classroom and had to do all of these professional experiences. So I really wish I could have gone back in time, honestly, and put myself out there more, maybe networked more, went to more professional development opportunities, because they really will go hand in hand when you're in the classroom communicating with parents, families, teachers, principals, administration. there are so many opportunities throughout the 4 years before you start student teaching or however long that can help you prepare for this. So I would say to take advantage of all of them when you can.
So how do you stay motivated and engaged throughout all of these experiences?
Well, I really do have to say a lot of it comes from the students and getting to know them. And once you're in a classroom, it's hard to leave. My student teaching is coming to an end now, and it's really sad, and I can't even imagine leaving the students, but they really are a big motivation. And like I said, I loved elementary school. I always looked up to my teachers and I wanted to be like them, and I just want to be that for my students. I want them to love coming to school instead of the typical idea that school is just homework and tests. I want students to come and feel like they're welcomed and accepted, and they really are the motivation. Like, they get me excited, and even the students, I just passed my certification test and they're hyping me up and they're really excited for me and they can't wait for me to be a teacher too. So truly they do care and their families do care. So that's the motivation that keeps me pushing through.
So do you have any plans after everything ends, after you graduate? Do you have any plans lined up?
I am planning on going home to New York, where I want to get my master's degree, because in New York you're required to get a master's degree. And I'd like to keep teaching in early childhood education. I never really thought I'd want to be in a 4th grade classroom or anything science related, but now that I've been introduced to this through Bloomsburg, I truly could see myself in 4th grade. But if New York doesn't work out, I have a couple opportunities aligned here, so we'll see.
Thank you for listening to our 5th and final podcast of this year. Thank you so much, Liv, for joining us today, and we'll see you guys later.